People say one forgotten item can't change your life. They're wrong. The coffee in my travel mug had gone cold nearly 4 hours ago, but I kept taking small sips anyway, hoping caffeine could somehow fix a day that seemed determined to fall apart. By the time I finally shut down my computer, the office around me was almost empty. The overhead lights reflected off rows of abandoned desks, turning the entire floor into a quiet maze of shadows and glass. I glanced at the clock in the corner of my screen. 10:28 p.m. Another late night. Another promise to my daughter broken. I rubbed my eyes and reached for my purse. My neck ached. My shoulders burned. My inbox still had 43 unread emails. But none of that mattered as much as the text waiting on my phone. It was from Lily, 7 years old. My entire world. Mom, don't forget movie night. The message had been sent 3 hours earlier. Guilt settled heavily in my chest. Movie night was our thing. Every Friday. No matter how busy work became. No matter how tight money got. It was the one promise I always tried to keep. Tonight I was already late. I hurried through the parking garage beneath the building, climbed into my aging Honda Accord, and started the 40-minute drive home through steady rain. The windshield wipers moved back and forth in a hypnotic rhythm while my thoughts raced through overdue bills, rent notices, and a client who had canceled the largest contract I'd landed all year. That contract had been my safety net. Now it was gone, along with half the income I'd counted on for the next 6 months. By the time I reached our apartment building, exhaustion sat so deep in my bones it felt permanent. I climbed 3 flights of stairs, unlocked the door, and found Lily asleep on the couch. A half-finished bowl of popcorn rested beside her. The animated movie menu still glowed on the television screen. My heart broke a little. I carefully carried her to bed, tucked the blankets around her shoulders, and kissed her forehead. Then I sat at the kitchen table and opened my planner, trying to figure out how I was going to survive the next few weeks. That's when I noticed something missing. My stomach dropped instantly. I looked beside the chair, then across the counter, then back into my purse. Nothing. The laptop, my work laptop, the laptop containing every file, every project, every backup for the presentation scheduled first thing Monday morning. I could see it clearly in my mind, sitting on my desk, under the soft glow of the office lamp, 22 miles away. I grabbed my car keys so fast they slipped from my fingers and hit the floor. Outside, the rain intensified against the windows, and somehow, deep in my chest, I had the terrifying feeling that forgetting that laptop was only the beginning. For nearly 30 seconds, I stood frozen in my kitchen staring at the wall while rain tapped against the window above the sink. Then survival instincts finally took over. I grabbed my phone and called the office. Straight to voicemail. I tried the building security desk. No answer. The digital clock on the microwave read 11:18 p.m. Most sane people were asleep. Unfortunately, panic does not care about common sense. I slipped my shoes back on and reached for my keys, already calculating how long it would take to drive back downtown, retrieve the laptop, and make it home before sunrise. Then I looked toward Lily's bedroom. The apartment fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. I could not leave her alone, not at this hour, not even for an hour. I sank into a chair and pressed both hands against my face. The presentation on Monday was not just important. It was everything. If I lost that project after losing the contract earlier that day, I was not sure what would happen next. My savings account was already hanging on by a thread. Another setback could mean falling behind on rent completely. My phone buzzed suddenly on the table. I nearly jumped. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering. "Hello?" A calm male voice responded. "Claire Bennett." My grip tightened around the phone. "Yes." There was a brief pause. the sound of rain in the background. Then, "I believe you left something at work." I sat upright immediately. My laptop. Yes. Relief rushed through me so fast it made me dizzy. Oh my God. Thank you. I was about to drive back and get it. Another short silence followed. That will not be necessary. Before I could ask what he meant, the call ended. I stared at the screen, confused. Maybe security had found it. Maybe someone had locked it away until morning. It was strange, but at least it was safe. I was still trying to make sense of the conversation when a knock echoed through the apartment. 3 firm knocks. Nothing aggressive, nothing rushed, just deliberate. My heart skipped. At nearly midnight, nobody knocked on my door. Nobody except bad news. I crossed the apartment slowly and looked through the peephole. For a second, my brain struggled to process what I was seeing. A tall man stood outside beneath the dim hallway light. Dark suit, dark overcoat. Rainwater glistened on his shoulders. In one hand, he carried a black laptop bag. Behind him, visible through the stairwell window, sat a black SUV parked at the curb below. Expensive. Impossibly expensive. The man looked up slightly, almost as if he knew I was watching. Then he lifted the bag, my laptop. I unlocked the door and opened it halfway. The stranger's eyes met mine. Gray-green, calm, controlled, impossible to read. He held out the bag. "You left this behind." And for reasons I could not explain, standing there in the quiet hallway, I suddenly felt like the night had just become far more complicated. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Rain tapped softly against the stairwell window while I stood there holding the door halfway open and staring at a man I had never seen before. Up close. He looked even more out of place in my apartment building. Everything about him seemed precise. The tailored coat, the polished shoes, the quiet confidence. He handed me the laptop bag without hesitation, as if delivering important things in the middle of the night was perfectly normal. "Thank you," I finally said, accepting it. "You have no idea how much trouble this saved me." His gaze lowered briefly to the bag before returning to me. "I imagine it was important." "It is." I laughed nervously. Possibly my entire career. Something almost resembling amusement touched the corner of his mouth. Almost. Then it disappeared. "Then I am glad it made it home." Home. The word sounded different coming from him. More deliberate. As though he understood exactly how much that place mattered. Before I could ask who he was or why he had personally brought the laptop, a small voice drifted down the hallway behind me. "Mom." I turned immediately. Lily stood barefoot at the end of the hall, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Her blonde hair was tangled from bed, and she was clutching the stuffed rabbit she had owned since kindergarten. "Sweetheart, what are you doing up?" She looked past me and noticed the stranger. Most children would have hidden behind a parent. Lily simply tilted her head with curiosity. "Who is that?" The man remained completely still. Patient. Respectful. I expected the awkwardness adults usually showed around children. Instead, something in his expression softened. Not dramatically. Just enough for me to notice. "Someone who helped your mother," he answered. Lily stepped closer. "You brought her computer?" He nodded once. "I did. That was nice." Her response was immediate and sincere. Then she disappeared back into her room for several seconds. I was about to follow her when she returned carrying a folded piece of paper. "Here." She held it out toward him. The man looked genuinely surprised. Slowly, he accepted it. He unfolded the paper and stared down at a child's drawing made with colored pencils. A smiling stick-figure family, a yellow sun, a crooked house. Nothing special, at least not to anyone else. I made that at school, Lily explained proudly. You can keep it because you helped my mom. The hallway grew strangely quiet. The man studied the drawing longer than expected. His eyes lingered on it for several seconds before he carefully folded it again and slipped it into the inside pocket of his coat. Thank you, Lily. His voice sounded different now, softer, warmer. Lily smiled. Mission accomplished. Then she yawned dramatically. I guided her back toward her bedroom, but when I looked over my shoulder one last time, the stranger was still standing there, watching us, not with curiosity, not with judgment, with something else entirely, something I could not understand. And somehow that unsettled me far more than if he had simply walked away. The next morning felt almost unreal. I kept expecting the previous night to reveal itself as some stress-induced dream created by exhaustion and overdue bills. But the laptop sat exactly where I had left it on the kitchen table, and the memory of the stranger remained sharp in my mind. His voice, his composure, the way he had carefully tucked Lily's drawing into his coat pocket. By lunchtime, I had convinced myself I would probably never see him again. Life had a way of pushing unusual moments aside and replacing them with practical problems. Mine arrived before 2 o'clock. An email from a client appeared in my inbox with the subject line, "Urgent." My stomach tightened immediately. Losing one major contract had already damaged my budget for the year. Losing another could be disastrous. I opened the message and prepared for bad news. Instead, I blinked in confusion. The client was not canceling. Quite the opposite. They wanted to expand the project, nearly double its value. I read the email twice before believing it, then a third time. The timing made no sense. Less than 24 hours earlier, they had been preparing to walk away. Now they were suddenly enthusiastic, grateful, flexible. By the end of the afternoon, I had signed paperwork that might actually keep my finances afloat for months. Walking home that evening, I felt something unfamiliar. Relief. Real relief. The kind that loosened a knot in your chest you had forgotten was there. I stopped at a small coffee shop near Lily's school and ordered 2 hot chocolates as a celebration. Lily talked nonstop during the walk home, telling me stories about a class project involving planets and dinosaurs. Apparently, both subjects belonged together somehow in 2nd grade. I was smiling at one of her explanations when I noticed a black SUV parked across the street. My steps slowed. It looked strangely familiar, large, immaculate, expensive enough to buy several apartments like mine. The windows were dark. The engine was running. A second later, it pulled away from the curb and disappeared into traffic. I told myself it meant nothing. Cities were full of expensive vehicles, but the uneasy feeling stayed with me. 3 days later, I saw the stranger again. I was standing in line at a small neighborhood bookstore while Lily searched for a new chapter book. The bell above the entrance chimed softly. I glanced up, and there he was. The same dark coat, the same calm expression. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he nodded politely, as though running into me was the most natural thing in the world. My pulse quickened. "You again?" I said before I could stop myself. A faint smile appeared. "Hello, Claire." The fact that he remembered my name should not have surprised me. Somehow it did. Then Lily spotted him from across the store. Her entire face lit up. "Mom!" she shouted excitedly. "That is the laptop man." And judging by the look in his eyes, He seemed unexpectedly happy that she remembered him too. Over the next 2 weeks, seeing him became strangely normal. Not common, not expected. Just normal in the way certain things slowly work themselves into your routine before you realize it. Sometimes I would notice him across a crowded sidewalk, sometimes at a coffee shop, once outside Lily's school during afternoon pickup. He never approached unless spoken to, never crossed a line, never acted as though he belonged in our lives, yet somehow he kept appearing at the exact moments when life felt particularly heavy. The strange part was that Lily adored him, absolutely adored him. Every time she spotted him, her face lit up like Christmas morning. She would wave enthusiastically, while I stood there wondering how a man who barely spoke had somehow become her favorite person outside our family. One Saturday afternoon, we ran into him again at a community art fair near the river. Lily immediately dragged me toward a booth selling handmade bookmarks, while Adrian followed several steps behind. By then, I finally knew his name. Adrian Romano. That was all he had volunteered. Nothing more. No explanations. No details. Just a name. The afternoon felt almost peaceful. For once, I was not thinking about overdue bills or work deadlines. Then everything changed. Lily was laughing one moment and swaying the next. At first I thought she had simply tripped. Then I saw the color drain from her face. My heart stopped. Lily. She blinked slowly. Her knees buckled. I caught her before she hit the ground. Panic flooded my chest so fast it stole my breath. Lily, sweetheart. Look at me. The crowd blurred around us. People stopped walking. Voices mixed together. Someone offered to call an ambulance. Someone else suggested water. None of it mattered. The only thing I could see was my daughter struggling to focus her eyes. Then Adrian was there. I did not see him arrive. 1 second he was across the plaza. The next he was kneeling beside us. Calm, focused, controlled. Claire. His voice cut through the noise. Look at me. I looked. The pediatric cardiac clinic on East 72nd. My eyes widened. How do you know about that? It was not public information. Very few people knew about Lily's condition. Adrian did not answer immediately. Instead, he gently helped support Lily's shoulders while emergency responders arrived. Within minutes, everything moved quickly. Questions, assessments, reassurances. Eventually, the doctors determined it was a temporary episode related to exhaustion and dehydration. Nothing immediately dangerous, nothing life-threatening. But after the fear faded, another feeling took its place. Confusion. Deep confusion. Late that evening, after Lily had fallen asleep safely in her bed, I sat alone in the kitchen replaying every detail. Adrian had known the name of her specialist. He had known exactly which clinic monitored her condition. He had known things he should not know. I stared at my phone for nearly 10 minutes before finally opening the search bar. Then I typed 2 words, Adrian Romano, and what appeared on my screen made my blood run cold. The search results kept loading long after I stopped breathing normally. News articles, business magazines, financial reports, photos taken outside luxury hotels and corporate events. Adrian Romano was not simply wealthy. He was one of the most powerful men in the city. The headlines described him as a business magnate, an investor, a shipping empire owner. But buried beneath the polished language were other words: influence, connections, fear, the kind of reputation people discussed carefully and only when they believed nobody important was listening. I sat alone at my kitchen table while the glow from my laptop illuminated the room. Every article made my stomach tighten further. The man who had delivered my laptop, the man Lily trusted without hesitation, the man who somehow knew details about my daughter's medical history. None of it made sense anymore. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I dropped Lily off at school and drove directly to work. I tried focusing on emails, deadlines, client meetings, anything except Adrian Romano. It did not work. By noon, I had reread the same document 4 times without remembering a single sentence. Then my phone buzzed. A text message. Unknown number. I already knew who it was before opening it. I hope Lily is feeling better. The message was simple, respectful. Somehow that made it worse. My fingers hovered above the screen. Finally, I typed a reply. How do you know about her condition? The response arrived less than a minute later. Because I asked questions after the night I met both of you. I stared at the words, anger mixed with confusion. You investigated my family. Several minutes passed before another message appeared. I wanted to make sure you were safe. Safe. The word irritated me more than it should have. I locked my phone and shoved it into my purse. That evening I found him waiting outside a small cafe near my office. He stood beside the entrance as though he had all the time in the world. The moment he saw me, he straightened slightly. My pulse immediately accelerated. We need to talk, I said. He nodded once. I expected that. We sat at a table near the window. Rain drifted softly outside while customers chatted around us. Normal people living normal lives. I envied them. Who are you really? I asked quietly. Adrian held my gaze. For the first time since meeting him, he looked tired. Not physically, emotionally. As though he had carried something heavy for a very long time. The internet already answered part of that question. Not the part that matters. Silence stretched between us. Finally, he leaned back slightly. You are right to be angry. That is not an answer. His eyes lowered briefly before returning to mine. No, he said softly. But it is the truth. Then he reached into his coat pocket and removed a folded piece of paper. Lily's drawing. The same drawing she had given him weeks earlier. It looked worn now, like something he carried every day. And suddenly I realized this story had never been as simple as I thought it was. For the next few days, I avoided him. It was easier that way. Easier to focus on work. Easier to convince myself that whatever connection had formed between our lives could still be untangled before it became something neither of us understood. Adrian respected that distance, at least on the surface. No messages, no unexpected appearances, no black SUV parked across the street. Life slowly began to feel normal again. Then Friday arrived. I was picking Lily up from an after-school art program when my phone rang. The number on the screen made my stomach tighten immediately. Ethan. Lily's father. I had not heard from him in almost 8 months. Not since another broken promise to visit. Not since another long explanation about how circumstances were unfair and nothing was ever his fault. I almost ignored the call. Almost. Hello? Silence lingered for several seconds before he spoke. We need to talk about Lily. Every protective instinct inside me woke up instantly. What about her? I think it is time she spent more time with me. I stopped walking. Lily continued chatting beside me, unaware of the tension flooding through my body. You have barely called her this year. People change, Claire. His voice sounded strange, nervous, desperate. I am trying to fix things. Something felt wrong, deeply wrong. After ending the call, I could not shake the feeling. That evening, another message arrived. Then another. Questions about Lily's schedule, her school, her activities, details he had never cared about before. I answered none of them. 3 days later, the school called me during work. My heart nearly stopped when I saw the number. Every parent fears that call. Miss Doc Bennett, the administrator asked. A man came asking questions about Lily today. Ice spread through my chest. Who? The answer did not surprise me. Ethan. Apparently he had arrived unexpectedly asking about pickup procedures and emergency contact policies. The school had refused to provide information. By the time I reached the parking lot after work, my hands were shaking. I climbed into my car and immediately called the only person who seemed to know things before they happened. Adrian answered on the first ring. Claire. Hearing my name in his voice almost broke something inside me. I think something is wrong. The words came out smaller than I intended. I explained everything. The phone remained silent for several moments after I finished. When Adrian finally spoke, his voice had become impossibly calm. Where are you? In my office parking garage. Stay there. Adrian. Stay there, Claire. Not a command. A promise. 20 minutes later, a black SUV pulled into the garage. Adrian stepped out and walked toward my car. For the first time since meeting him, I realized something unsettling. No matter how hard I tried to stay angry, seeing him arrive made me feel safe. And judging by the look in his eyes, he already knew far more about Ethan than I did. Adrian drove me home that night, and for most of the trip, neither of us said much. The city lights slid across the windows, while questions crowded my mind faster than I could ask them. When we reached my apartment building, he turned off the engine but made no move to leave. The silence felt different now, less guarded, more honest. Tell me what you know about Ethan, I said quietly. Adrian stared through the windshield for several seconds before answering. I know he has made several poor decisions recently. My stomach tightened. What does that mean? His jaw shifted slightly. It means he is surrounded by people who do not always make responsible choices. I hated vague answers. He knew that. Yet somehow he seemed unwilling to say more. Finally, he looked at me. The expression in his eyes was not fear, it was concern. Real concern. Claire, I do not think Ethan wants to hurt Lily. Relief appeared for half a second. Then Adrian continued, but I think he is desperate. Desperate people sometimes stop thinking clearly. The words stayed with me long after I entered my apartment. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, Lily seemed perfectly normal. She talked about school projects and a science quiz while eating cereal at the kitchen counter. Watching her laugh made everything else feel distant for a little while. Until my phone rang again. This time it was Ethan. Against my better judgment. I answered. His voice sounded exhausted. Older somehow. Claire. Please, I just want to see my daughter. I closed my eyes. Then why are you showing up at her school? Silence followed. Because I am running out of options. The answer chilled me more than anger would have. After the call ended, I sat staring at the wall for nearly 10 minutes. Then I received another message. Not from Ethan. From Adrian. Meet me for lunch. There is something you need to know. An hour later, we sat across from each other in a quiet restaurant overlooking the river. Adrian looked unusually serious. More serious than I had ever seen him. Without speaking, he slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents, financial records, legal filings, notices. I scanned the pages and felt my pulse accelerate. Ethan was drowning in debt. Not ordinary debt. The kind that snowballs faster than a person can recover from. The kind that destroys careers, relationships, entire futures. How did you get these? I asked. Adrian ignored the question. Read the last page. My hands trembled slightly as I turned it over. There, attached to a recent filing, was a note indicating that Ethan had attempted to use future custody discussions as part of a financial negotiation. My breath caught. No. Adrian remained silent. No, I repeated. He would never. But even as I said it, memories surfaced. Broken promises, excuses, months of absence, small warning signs I had chosen to ignore. Adrian's voice softened. Claire, he is not thinking like a father right now. I looked down at the papers again, then at the folded drawing still peeking from Adrian's coat pocket, and for the first time, I finally understood why he had been protecting us from the very beginning. 1 year later, my life looked nothing like it had the night I sat at my kitchen table convinced everything was falling apart. The small design studio I had dreamed about for years occupied the corner of a renovated brick building downtown. Sunlight poured through oversized windows every morning. The walls displayed projects I was proud of. More importantly, the business was stable. For the first time in a very long time, I could look at my bank account without feeling anxious. Lily was doing better too. Her doctors were happy with her progress. She still attended regular appointments, but her smile came easier now. Her laughter filled every room she entered. The fear that had once followed us everywhere had finally begun to fade. Some things had changed slowly, others had changed all at once. Ethan eventually accepted the consequences of his choices and began rebuilding his life from a distance. The anger I once carried toward him softened into something quieter. Not forgiveness exactly, just acceptance. And Adrian remained exactly what he had always been. Steady, reliable, present. He never demanded space in our lives. He simply earned it one day at a time. School events, doctor appointments, weekend breakfasts, late-night phone calls when work became overwhelming. Somehow he was always there. The remarkable part was that he never asked for recognition. One Saturday afternoon, I stood in my office finishing paperwork while Lily sat at a nearby table drawing pictures. Adrian was reviewing documents across the room. The scene felt so ordinary that sometimes I forgot how impossible it would have seemed a year earlier. Lily suddenly looked up from her sketchbook. Adrian. He lowered the papers immediately. Yes. She held up a drawing proudly. Can you help me finish this? He smiled. Of course. She studied the picture for a moment. Then she said something that made time stop. Dad always helps with the hard parts. Silence settled over the room. My breath caught. Adrian froze completely. Lily blinked, confused by our reactions. To her, the word had arrived naturally, innocently, like the most obvious thing in the world. Adrian looked at me. I looked back at him. There were 1,000 emotions in that moment. Gratitude, relief, hope, love. None of them needed words. Lily simply returned to coloring, while Adrian moved to sit beside her. Together, they worked on this drawing, their heads bent over the paper. I watched them from across the room and felt something inside me finally settle. A year ago, I thought my future had been slipping through my fingers. I thought I was carrying every burden alone. Then one rainy night, a stranger knocked on my door holding a forgotten laptop. What I did not realize then was that destiny rarely announces itself. Sometimes it arrives quietly. Sometimes it asks for nothing. Sometimes it simply shows up when you need it most and stays long enough to become home.